Some words, once spoken, are never forgotten. Like a knife that doesn't bleed, but still leaves a scar. Some truths, even when they come from a mother or father, don't heal. They wear you down, create distance, and turn against you. In trying to connect with our adult children, we sometimes reveal more than we should. We speak from pain, we trust from a place of lack, and we end up being judged, ignored, or humiliated. This doesn't mean you should lie or swallow your story, but there are boundaries. If you don't protect them, they'll break you. Not everything you feel needs to be said. Not everything you've lived through should be laid bare in front of someone who isn't willing to understand you. In this video, we're going to walk through 9 truths you should never tell an adult child, even if it hurts. Because each one, if not expressed with awareness, can turn against you. And believe me, the last one is not only the most painful, it's also the most liberating. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. Stay with me until the end, because today you'll not only understand why some silences are an act of self-respect, but also how to reclaim your dignity without begging for understanding. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you handed over your most private secrets, only to see them used against you? It doesn't matter if it's a stranger, a partner, or your own child. The pain is the same, that feeling of having laid yourself bare before someone who didn't know or didn't care to cover you with respect. Today, I want you to ask yourself, without fear or excuses, who are you giving the keys to your inner world? Because this is the first truth you can't ignore if you want to keep your dignity intact. Don't share your deepest fears unless you're prepared for them to be used against you. Many mothers and fathers, as they reach a certain age, feel that the only way to stay connected with their adult children is through vulnerability. So they talk, they confess, they plead for company, explain old wounds that were never voiced before, and open up, hoping to be met with understanding. But often, that's not what they find. What they get instead is judgment, impatience, words like, "not this again," or "get over it already." And that moment, instead of bringing you closer, leaves you feeling more alone. Not because what you said wasn't true, but because you shared it with someone who wasn't ready or willing to receive it with love. Epictetus said it clearly, "Don't hand over your soul unless the other is ready to care for it." In this case, your soul is your story, your deepest fears. That lingering feeling of not having been enough as a mother, of growing old without recognition, of fearing a future in solitude. These truths deserve to be heard, but not by just anyone. And certainly not by someone who, even if they share your blood, has lost their empathy. Picture yourself as a temple. For years, you cared for every corner, built its pillars with effort, filled its spaces with devotion. Now, with time, that temple has cracks, dust, silences, but it's still sacred. Would you open the doors to someone who walks in with dirty shoes, who doesn't greet you, who only comes to criticize the aging walls? Then why hand over your most intimate fears to someone who shows no reverence for your journey? This isn't about staying silent out of pride. It's about choosing wisely who you speak to. Not all ears are bridges, some are traps, and when you speak from a place of need, from the longing to be seen or understood, you might end up more broken than before. Adult children don't always understand what it means to reach this stage of life. Some think that because you seem strong, you still are, always. And others, even harsher, believe that since you've fulfilled your role as a mother, they no longer have to deal with your emotions. But your emotions are not a burden, they are a real part of who you are. The key lies in where you place them. Maybe it's better to write down what you feel, to whisper it in prayer, to share it with someone who won't judge you. Because when an adult child turns your fear into a weakness, they don't just fail you as a child, they fail you as a human being. So the next time you feel the urge to tell your child how scared you are of being alone, how much it hurts not to get a call, how afraid you are your health won't last into the future, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself if they're the right place for that truth. Don't stay silent out of fear. Stay silent out of self-respect. Because your fears are real, but so is your dignity. And you weren't put on this earth to hand over your temple to someone who only knows how to desecrate it. It's time to talk about the second problem that's quietly ruining the lives of many people. Don't tell them how lonely you feel, hoping it will make them come back. This truth can hurt more than any other because it touches a deep, silent, almost shameful wound. Loneliness isn't always about physical absence. Sometimes you're surrounded by people and still no one really sees you. They don't call. They don't ask how you're doing. They don't celebrate your small wins or stand by you on your hard days. And in that emptiness, many mothers and fathers fall into the trap of confessing their loneliness in hopes of sparking change, like tossing a bottle into the sea, praying someone will find it one day. But here's the harsh truth. Saying, "I feel lonely," to an adult child who has already chosen distance doesn't spark compassion. It sparks discomfort. And that discomfort often turns into more avoidance. Because not all children have the maturity to hold their parents' pain without feeling attacked or responsible. Some hear those words and feel guilty. Others dismiss them as emotional manipulation. And some simply pull further away, unable to face something that reminds them of their own absence. From the Stoic point of view, loneliness is an inevitable part of the human condition. Marcus Aurelius said, "We are more alone than we think, even when we're surrounded." But that loneliness doesn't have to be a sentence. It can also be a source of inner strength, if you turn it into a space for connection with yourself. The problem begins when you use it as a message meant to provoke external sympathy, because what should be a private experience of reflection becomes a misread cry for help. Spiritually, loneliness can also carry a sacred meaning. In the silence, God speaks. In the stillness, the soul listens. But when loneliness is worn like a visible cross, as a burden you present to others for pity, you lose its sacredness. And worse, you give others the power to decide your worth based on how accompanied you are. In everyday life, this mistake shows up in small moments. You call your child and say, "I haven't heard from you in days. I feel so lonely." He answers with silence or with rushed words just to brush it off. You feel rejected, unseen, and it confirms your belief that you don't matter. But the problem wasn't feeling lonely. It was expecting that phrase to bring him back. A heart that doesn't hear won't soften with pleas. And someone who hasn't chosen to be there out of love won't stay because of guilt. That's the root of the conflict, the expectation that your pain, expressed with honesty, will provoke an act of love. Sometimes it does, but many times it doesn't. And that's not your fault. It simply reveals the emotional distance that already exists. So the real question isn't, how can I get them to show up, but how can I show up for myself with more love and less waiting? Emotional resilience isn't coldness. It's knowing you can live with your solitude without turning it into punishment. It's learning to turn silence into prayer, time without visits into moments of creation, and the absence of calls into a chance to truly hear yourself. Because if you live waiting for someone else to fill your emptiness, that emptiness will only grow. But if you choose to inhabit it with dignity, it stops being a void and becomes a sanctuary. Old age should not be lived begging for company. It should be lived building presence, not for others, but for yourself. Because, as Seneca said, we are never more accompanied than when we are at peace with ourselves. So if today you're feeling weighed down by loneliness, don't say it hoping someone will rescue you. Say, "I am alone, but not empty. I am alone, but not lost. I am alone, and from here, I begin again. That is self-respect. That is stoicism. That is choosing to awaken, even when no one is watching. If loneliness shouldn't be used as emotional currency, then this next step is crucial, because without it, you'll stay stuck in the same patterns, repeating cycles that only deepen the wear and tear. We've reached the third point in this video, and this is where things start to shift. Don't confess that you'd give anything to win their love back. This phrase, however noble it may sound, however much it may come from a deep desire to mend broken bonds, is a surrender of your dignity. I know, it's hard to hear, but when you give yourself entirely to the hope of affection, when you say you'd do anything to have that distant son or daughter close again, you place yourself in a position of submission that doesn't reflect your story or your worth. In Stoic philosophy, love is neither begged for nor bargained with. True love, the ancient sages said, is born from virtue, not need. And the virtue here is knowing how to love without losing respect for yourself. When you say you'd give anything to regain your children's love, what you're actually doing, without realizing it, is telling them that your inner peace depends solely on them. And that message, far from drawing them closer, pushes them away. Because it turns your love into a burden, into a demand disguised as devotion. And many adult children, unable to handle that kind of expectation, prefer distance over emotional pressure. The strategy I want to offer you here is simple, yet powerful. Redefine the love you give. Don't offer it as a debt or a plea. Offer it like someone offering a flower. No strings attached, no complaints, no expectation that it be accepted. This way of loving is more stoic, more free, and, though it may seem paradoxical, more effective. Because love born from freedom commands respect. And respect, when nurtured, can open the door to real reconnection. Picture a woman who, every time she talks to her children, reminds them how much she misses them, how badly she needs them to come back, how she'd give anything to get back what they once had. Every conversation turns into a lament. Every encounter a reminder of what's missing. Eventually, those children stop showing up, not because they don't love her, but because they feel suffocated by guilt. Now picture that same woman choosing a different path. She speaks calmly, shares her life without drama, gives her love unconditionally, and lets them decide how to respond. That calm, strong, dignified presence, it has an impact, because it doesn't beg, it invites, it doesn't demand, it holds space. And sometimes that's what stirs a sleeping conscience in a child. If these reflections have helped you see more clearly how to protect your self-respect during this stage of life, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Not just because it helps this message reach more people, but because it's a way of affirming that you too are choosing to awaken. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and write the phrase, "My love is not up for negotiation," because that says it all. There are still deeper truths to uncover, and I promise the last one might completely change the way you see your role at this stage in life. Stay with me. Earlier, we spoke about the dignity that's lost when love becomes a plea, a desperate need to be loved again by those who no longer truly see you. But there's a more subtle poison, one that seeps into daily life and slowly consumes what little strength you have left. We've reached the fourth point in this journey, and it's this. Don't explain your exhaustion hoping to be understood, because that hope, so human, so painful, often crashes into a cold, hard wall, indifference. This mistake is an invisible trap. It creeps in when you believe that if others just knew how hard it is for you to get up every day, how much effort it takes to keep a home, a life, a sense of normalcy going, then maybe they'd change the way they treat you. You think that if they understood the reality of your physical and emotional fatigue, They'd stop asking so much of you, stop expecting, as if your time and body were still limitless. But the truth is, the more you explain, the more exposed you become. And the more you show your exhaustion, the more invisible you feel, because most people don't like to face what they don't know how to hold. From a Stoic perspective, this is the moment when external judgment begins to control your internal perception. And that's dangerous, because you start to doubt yourself, your right to say no, your need to pause. You wait for someone to validate your fatigue, to say, "I understand, take a break." And when that doesn't come, you push yourself even harder, carrying responsibilities that are no longer yours, just so you won't be seen as a burden. But the paradox is cruel. The more you deny yourself to please others, the more drained you become, and the less they appreciate it. This pattern plays out in millions of older women who continue to be the silent backbone of their families. They keep cooking, caring, solving, giving, hoping someone someday will say thank you and mean it. But that gratitude never comes, because their sacrifice has become expected. And when they finally dare to say, "I'm tired," the response isn't comfort, it's annoyance. "What do you want me to do? You're always complaining. It's not that bad." Words like these don't just hurt, they erode. They make you feel like your humanity is a nuisance. But here's the truth you need to embrace, even if it stings. Your exhaustion doesn't need explaining. It needs respect. And that respect begins with you. Don't wait for the world to acknowledge your effort if you're not willing to grant yourself the right to rest. Saying, "I can't," is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's spiritual maturity. It's recognizing that your body has already given too much, and your soul now needs spaces where it's not used, but heard. When exhaustion is denied, it turns into resentment, and when it's shared with those who don't value it, it becomes humiliation. That's why, instead of explaining over and over how worn out you feel, start acting from the awareness that your energy is sacred. Learn to step back without asking permission. Learn to pause without apologizing. Learn to rest not as a reward, but as a right. Because this stage of life is not an extension of your service. It's a space to reclaim what you gave away without limits: your time, your body, your care. Remember this: true respect isn't asked for, it's embodied. And if those around you can't see it, maybe it's time to reconsider your place in that environment. Not with anger, but with clarity. Because a tired woman who decides to stop explaining herself is taking the first step toward a lighter life. A life where silence isn't punishment, but peace, and where the most important understanding no longer comes from others, but from within. That understanding that gently says, "You've done enough. Now it's time to stay with yourself." We've arrived at the fifth point in this journey, and perhaps it's one of the quietest yet most dangerous of all. Don't tell them how deeply they've disappointed you in the hope that it will make them change. This is one of those truths that comes from legitimate pain, from the open wound left by a child who betrayed your expectations, who walked away without explanation, or who returns only to wound you with indifference. But expressing that disappointment with the hope it will trigger transformation is, in reality, another way of clinging to a hope that doesn't always deserve to be held on to. We think that if we clearly explain how much their actions or lack of actions hurt us, they'll open their eyes, apologize, or at least reconsider. But most of the time, that's not what happens. What happens is the opposite. They accuse you of exaggerating, of manipulating, of refusing to let go of the past. You become the annoying voice disrupting their artificial peace with truths they are unwilling to face. At the root of this problem is the expectation of emotional justice. You hope the other person will understand, reflect, take responsibility. But if they haven't done the inner work of maturing and honestly facing what they've caused, then all they hear when you speak of your disappointment is yet another criticism. So they defend themselves. They pull away, and you're left doubly wounded by what they did and by how they reacted when you tried to speak your truth. This dynamic, repeated over the years, ends up silencing your inner voice. You start to question yourself. Was it really that bad? Am I overreacting? Should I just stay quiet? And so, disappointment turns into guilt, and guilt into silence. But you are not obligated to stay silent about what you've lived. You only need to change the place you speak from. Don't speak expecting acknowledgement. Speak as someone clearing her soul to keep walking forward. The difference is immense. When you speak to be heard by someone who refuses to listen, you drain your spirit. But when you speak to release what you can no longer carry, you begin to free yourself. And real freedom doesn't come from someone else's forgiveness. It comes from your own self-respect. Clinging to this mistake makes you a prisoner of your need to be understood. And that prison is especially cruel in old age because time becomes more precious and the soul more delicate. You can no longer afford to live waiting for someone to say, "You were right." Not anymore. Because every day you spend hanging on to that need, you lose energy, clarity, and power. The respect you're seeking out there must be built inside, brick by brick, until one day you can look back on your story without bitterness, without begging, and say, "Yes, they disappointed me, but I won't disappoint myself by staying stuck there." Turning this around isn't easy, but it is possible. And it doesn't begin with them. It begins with you. With a quiet, firm decision to stop speaking to those who don't listen, not out of pride, but out of self-preservation. Not to punish, but to protect your peace. The mindset you need is one that no longer lives to be understood, but to live with integrity. One that no longer repeats her pain as a complaint, but as a marker of what she'll no longer accept. Let me tell you something that may hurt, but could also save you. Sometimes your children won't change, not because they can't, but because they don't want to. And when that happens, it's no longer about fighting for their attention. It's about making peace with yourself and with your truth. Because your story, exactly as it is, already has value, even if no one hears it, even if no one acknowledges it, even if you're the only one who holds it. And that act of holding yourself up, even when everyone else has let go, is the beginning of a new way of living. Without fear, without begging, without explanation, with your back straight and your soul at peace. When you stop seeking understanding from those who are unwilling to give it, something inside you begins to break free. But that freedom won't last if you keep giving away pieces of your dignity without even realizing it. That's why we've come to the 6th point in this video, and it's here that many uncomfortable truths come to light. Don't talk about your financial situation if you're not ready to be judged by it. This isn't a call for secrecy or shame. It's a warning against naive exposure, the belief that sharing everything in good faith will lead to support or compassion. Because the harsh reality is that even those who should protect you most can turn your struggles into ammunition for criticism. I want you to picture something. Imagine opening your door to your son or daughter and, with the best of intentions, telling them that your pension isn't enough, that you've fallen behind on a bill, that you're selling a few things just to make it through the month. You're not trying to manipulate. They were raised in your arms, and you trust them to understand. But instead of support, you get judgment. Why don't you get a job? I've got my own bills to pay. This is what happens when you don't plan your life better. And suddenly, a private moment turns into a courtroom. You're measured by your bank account, reduced to a number, judged for decisions you made decades ago, as if everything you gave means nothing now. When you reveal your financial struggles without awareness, you hand over control of the narrative. And then, You're seen as a burden, an uncomfortable presence to tolerate, not the woman who held a family together with her hands and her silence. The respect you should receive automatically for all you've done becomes conditional. Conditional on money, independence, usefulness, and if you can't pay, emotionally or materially, you're treated as if you have no value at all. This doesn't mean you have to stay silent forever. It means you have to choose wisely who you share your situation with and from what place you speak, not from the hope they'll give you more, but from the certainty that they won't give you less. Because when you speak of your lack from guilt or sorrow, you give others permission to treat you as weak, broken, defeated. And you're not. You're someone facing a hard reality, yes, but also someone who has held others up, survived losses, and worked miracles with what little she had. Don't let money become the measure of your worth. The harsh truth of this stage of life is that you often can't earn like you once did. Your body doesn't respond the same, the job market is cruel, and society is impatient with the elderly. But just because you can't produce the way you used to doesn't mean you're worth any less. The real danger is in believing your only power lies in what you can provide. That's not true. Your power lies in your story, your presence, your ability to say, "I'm going through a hard time, but I won't beg for respect." Because if you do, if you lay out your finances hoping it will spark generosity, you risk being seen as someone who needs saving, instead of someone who deserves to be accompanied. And that changes everything. People start to feel entitled to comment, to set conditions, to treat you with pity. And pity, as you know, is a quiet kind of humiliation. The shift begins when you decide your story won't be told from a place of lack, but from dignity. You can say, "I don't have much, but I'm not empty. I can't give you what you expect, but I'm not giving up. I'm not afraid of my situation, I'm afraid of losing respect for myself." That's the truth you need to hold on to. Because what's in your wallet is temporary, but what you choose to reveal or protect with intention is what will build your peace or your storm. And you didn't come this far just to let a number define your place in the world. After talking about how your financial situation can become a weapon in the wrong hands, it becomes clear that self-respect isn't built through explanations. It's built through boundaries. But there's a quieter, deeper confession that many older women continue to make without even realizing it. And that brings us to the 7th point in this video. Don't reveal that you're still hoping they'll understand you one day. That hope, however valid it may seem, can become the heaviest anchor in your life. Because waiting for understanding from someone who has already chosen not to listen is like watering soil that will never grow anything. It means living each day tied to a possibility that may never come. And the worst part is that this waiting doesn't just keep you stuck, it drains you. It places you in a childlike position, as if your happiness depended on an apology, a gesture, a "I'm sorry" that likely will never come. Not because you don't deserve it, but because the other person lacks the capacity or the will to acknowledge what they owe you. This is where many get trapped. They keep cooking with love, answering short calls, replying to messages with hope, waiting for the day something changes, for the child who's ignored them to finally wake up and say, "Now I understand everything you did for me." But real life rarely works that way. And the longer you spend waiting for that understanding, the more you miss out on the present. Because while you're stuck in the past and what never came, the present slips away. And with it, your energy, your clarity, your ability to build something new. There's no easy way to say this. No one is coming to give you the validation you don't give yourself. No one is going to explain why they failed you in the way you deserve to hear. And if you keep postponing your healing in the hope that someone else will one day understand, you'll live frustrated, disappointed, and emotionally dependent on people who aren't willing to move for you. That's the truth. And only when you accept it does real change begin. Because when you accept that, They may never understand your story. You reclaim the power to live it through your own eyes, not to be recognized by others, but to stop begging for closure that never came. This is what Stoicism teaches, harsh but clear. Inner peace doesn't depend on what others do. It depends on what you decide to stop waiting for. As long as you wait for something that's out of your control, you're a prisoner. But the moment you stop waiting and start living, you reclaim your freedom. It's not resignation, it's liberation, it's not coldness, it's maturity. And yes, it's hard. Because there's still a part of you that dreams of that healing moment. But if you stay there, stuck in that illusion, life will pass by without you ever truly feeling it. Today is the day to let go of that expectation. Not to forget what you've lived, but to stop repeating it like an unfinished story. Because if you keep waiting to be understood, you'll keep speaking to a wall. But if you start understanding yourself, if you begin to close your own chapter without needing anyone's permission, then yes, a new life begins. A life without chains, without old scripts, without paralyzing nostalgia. A life that is finally yours, because you didn't come to this stage to die waiting. You came to be reborn without apologizing. And that decision, only you can make it. We've just let go of a dangerous illusion, the silent hope that one day they'll finally understand us, as if that overdue recognition were the key to our peace. But there's an even deeper trap, one that disguises itself as love and that many continue to fall into without realizing. We've reached the 8th point in this video, and it's time to face it head on. Don't tell them you don't know how to go on if they walk away. Because that phrase, even when it comes from the most honest pain, doesn't bring closeness, it creates power. You're telling someone else that your ability to stay alive depends on their presence. And in that moment, you stop being a mother, a woman, an adult, and become someone begging to exist. That's not love, it's emotional submission. The real action begins with one decision. Never again place your emotional stability in the hands of someone who hasn't shown they know how to care for it. That phrase, "If you leave, I don't know what I'll do," needs to die today. Not because it's not sincere, but because it's destructive. Telling someone that without their affection, you lose your way is handing them total control over your life. And when someone senses they have that control, they may choose to stay out of pity or leave, knowing you'll still be waiting. Neither option honors you. The mindset needed to support this change isn't cold or distant, it's clear. It's knowing that you are worth more than any relationship you have. That if someone chooses to walk away, the emptiness they leave behind shouldn't be filled with desperation, but with presence, your own. There's no magic formula for this. It's a daily practice. It's waking up every morning and telling yourself, it doesn't matter who's here or not, I keep going. I choose. I carry my own life. Because as long as you believe you can't move forward without that person, you'll remain tied to a past that won't change. And every day you live from that dependency is a day lost. I want you to understand this clearly. Yes, you can keep going, even if it hurts, even if they don't reply to your messages, even if the calls have stopped, even if the table feels emptier. You can keep going because their silence does not define your ability to rebuild. You can keep going because the voice that matters most is not the one outside, but the one you choose to hear within. The voice that says, no more begging, no more placing my life in someone else's hands, no more living as if needing were shameful. You don't need them to return. You need you to return to yourself. And if there's a part of you that still resists, if there's a voice that says, but it's my son, my daughter, my family, don't silence it, but don't fully believe it either. Because you are you too. And you deserve a life where moving forward isn't an act of dependence, but a courageous choice. Today, you can start with one small but powerful act. Stop speaking of them as if they're your salvation. Call them by their name, Remember who you are without them and start building from there. The final responsibility is yours, not because you chose everything, but because now you can choose something different. And if you truly do, without excuses, without hesitation, then a new life begins. A life where moving forward is no longer a threat, but a promise of freedom. We've seen how many women become trapped in relationships where their emotional autonomy fades, in routines where the absence of the other seems to justify their own paralysis. But choosing to change isn't just an act of courage, it's an act of rupture. Because when you stop depending, stop waiting, stop pleading, you come face to face with who you really are without the reflection of others. And it's there, right at that threshold, that the final and perhaps most common mistake appears, the one that closes this journey. Don't reveal that you're still hoping they'll understand you one day. This hope, as silent as it is cruel, is the most subtle way of keeping yourself stuck in a story you should have let go of long ago. And while we already addressed it emotionally, now it's time to dismantle it from a deeper place. Self-deception. The problem isn't just that you're waiting for understanding, it's that you've convinced yourself that this waiting gives your life meaning, as if admitting they'll never understand you would be too painful, too final. So you hold on to thoughts like, one day they'll get it, when they become parents they'll see, someday they'll realize all I did for them. But what you're not telling yourself, and what you need to hear, is this, that someday might never come. And while you keep writing letters no one will read, enduring disrespect disguised as distance, you delay your own closure. Because facing the truth that they won't understand you doesn't weaken you, it frees you. You don't need their validation to start over. You need to let go of the illusion that one day they'll come back different. The most common excuses that stop this process always sound reasonable. I don't want to cut ties. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to close the door forever. But deep down, you know that bond is already broken. You're already experiencing loneliness, even with them alive. And that door, though technically ajar, only lets in cold drafts. The fear of closing it for good is just fear of recognizing yourself as the sole author of what comes next. Because if you no longer depend on them or expect anything from them, then everything you do or don't do is entirely up to you. And that's heavy, because for years you were taught to live for others, to put your children first, to postpone your joy until they were okay. But that time never comes, and while you wait, your life wears down. Dismantling these justifications takes brutal honesty. You're not lacking years, you're lacking decision. You're not lacking love, you're lacking direction. You're not too old to start over. You're just tired of repeating the same thing and expecting it to change. And that only breaks with a sentence few people dare to say, I deserve peace, even if they don't give it to me. That sentence isn't selfish, it's justice. And if today you choose to embrace it, without asking permission, without explaining yourself, without justifying your boundaries, then everything changes. Because you stop staring at a closed door and begin building a new home within yourself. A home without begging, without guilt, without needing to be understood in order to live in peace. So I'll say it one last time. Don't tell them you're still hoping they'll understand you one day. Not because you don't deserve it, but because you don't need it anymore. What you need is to reclaim your place in your own life. And that begins when you let go of the waiting and finally choose yourself. You didn't make it this far out of curiosity or casual interest. You made it because something inside you said, enough. Because somewhere in these words, you recognized a truth you already felt, but hadn't yet dared to fully name. And that's no small thing. Not everyone reaches the end. Not everyone is willing to face what so many prefer to sugarcoat. But you did. And that alone sets you apart from those who keep repeating excuses and those who've chosen to wake up. What we've explored today isn't a set of rules, commandments, or feel-good advice. These are warnings, boundaries you must protect if you truly want this stage of your life to be defined by peace, not emotional begging. Because respect is not up for negotiation, especially not at this age when you've already given more than your share, and no one has the right to keep charging you for what they never thanked you for. The Stoic Garden exists for this very reason, to say what others won't, to honor your story without decoration or empty speeches. My name is Gabriel, and if you're here, it's because you know you're done with lukewarm company and messages that soften what still hurts. Here, we rebuild ourselves through truth, not blind hope. And if that resonates with you, I invite you to leave a comment with the phrase, "I no longer wait for understanding," along with the country you're listening from. Because that phrase isn't just a statement, it's an act of sovereignty. It's telling the world, and more importantly, yourself, that you've chosen to move forward without clinging to what never arrives. I invite you to subscribe and become part of this community, not one that seeks to be entertained, but one that's ready to take back control of life. Share this video with someone you know needs to hear these truths, even if they sting. Because sometimes, one word spoken at the right moment can save years of heartache. And if today's message has helped you see things more clearly, don't stop here. On the screen, you'll find 2 videos that can help you keep going deeper. Choose one and continue this inner conversation that's only just begun. Because self-respect isn't a goal, it's a daily practice. And here, in this garden of hard truths, we're here to help you nurture it. No rush, no retreat.